Good evening. I'm Gabe Merritt, and I'm a performing arts junior from Denver, Colorado. For 6 nail-biting years, we watched tonight's honoree navigate a zombie apocalypse as a regular guy who becomes a hero, a Prince Charming, and a final oasis of good. Glenn may have been stolen from us, but in return, the world was introduced to Steven Yeun, star of Minari and one of the most dynamic actors working today. His ability to pivot, imagine a world, and sink into his characters reflects his dedication to and love of improv comedy, a practice he committed to when starting out in Chicago and continues to this day. Yeun's tireless work ethic, poignant honesty, and boldness make him a constant inspiration for me as I train for my career. From Okja, Mayhem, and Burning to his tour de force performance in Minari, Steven Yeun continues to show us all that he is truly just getting started. Let's take a look.
아빠는 빅 가든 하나 만들 거야.
우리 새로 시작한다고 그랬잖아. 이게 그거야.
What a beautiful family. Glad you're here.
Grandma smells like Korea.
야, 뭐라고? Grandma smell?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Discovery Award honoree Steven Yeun. Congratulations, sir.
Thanks, Gabe. Thank you. I have this here. This is pretty amazing. Thank you to SCAD. Thank you to President Wallace. Thank you to all the students for this amazing award. And I hope I do it justice. It's been really wonderful. And I've been so blessed to be able to be part of productions such as Minari and Burning and Sorry to Bother You and so on, and Walking Dead. So I can only count this as continued joy for me. And thank you again for this incredible thing. And I'm really glad and looking forward to what seems like us connecting deeper and telling human stories so that we all might see each other. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Canfield with Entertainment Weekly. Congratulations again to Steven Yeun.
Thank you.
Excited to be moderating post special SCAD screening of Minari with Steven and the director of the film, Lee Isaac Chung. I think everyone who's just seen this is probably recovering slowly from what is a very emotional experience, a very moving experience. And Isaac, I wanted to start with you on what strikes me about the film, which is it feels so authentic and lived in as a family portrait in a way I think very few films are able to achieve. And I wanted to start by asking just about the origins of the film and how you were able to create such a feeling there that is difficult to achieve.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, this film really did start from a very personal place where I was thinking about the types of films that I'd like to make after my wife and I had a baby. Like we thought, or I started to think more about telling very personal stories and things that I could leave behind. And I think around the time she was about 5 years old, I was starting to see the world more from her point of view in a way. And I was kind of remembering back to what it was like for me to be that age and the things that I remember from when I was 5. And that's about the time that I moved to Arkansas for the first time, and that my dad took us as a family to this mobile home in the middle of nowhere and said, "This is your home." And like my mom had no idea that he was going to do that. Yeah, through various different reasons, I just started to jot out a lot of memories about that time. And I just noticed like that really stood out to me, our arrival at the farm. And then also remembering the fact that my grandmother ended up burning down half of the farm in a fire that was much even worse than what we depict on the screen. And I just thought there's an interesting story to tell there that starts with an arrival on a farm and then ends with this great fire that they could not have expected. And I tried to pepper it as much as possible with my own memories of that time, and tried to order them in a way that would give each family member a story. And I didn't want it to just be an imitation of my family's life, but tried to create fiction out of these memories as well, and to give the actors as well a lot of freedom to create and perform within the film. So yeah, that was the genesis. I think at the anchor, since it is so personal, that probably, I don't know, it still blows me away that people are really connecting with this film, just because it's such a random story, a group of people moving to Arkansas to start a farm, and yet a lot of people have been really connecting with it. So yeah, it's just blown me away.
I think in a way that speaks to the movie's power, that it is such a particular narrative, and yet it does have this resonance, I think, for such a wide swath of viewers. Stephen, can you talk a little bit about finding your place in this sort of tapestry as an actor, and finding that room, as Isaac mentioned?
Yeah, I think Isaac really crafted something so true, and perhaps we kind of nail it. We kind of talk about it as a personal story, but what was really apparent in his script was he left a lot of space for all of us to kind of fit into his narrative, his story. He left it open, not because he didn't write enough or he wasn't prepared for things like that, but because he wrote it so fundamentally honest, you could relate to it through kind of so many different perspectives. And so for me, when I was engaging in Jacob, when I was engaging in Jacob, we made sure that we were telling the story of this singular person, of Jacob, which, has pieces of me, has pieces of Isaac, has pieces of our fathers, has pieces of just someone caught in the gaps, caught in the alleyways of reality and society. And I think those are all kind of feelings that most all of us can relate to or grasp onto, or at least hold to some degree. And for me, it was such a incredible experience because as an actor, I was not only tasked to play somebody else, but also I was tasked to strip away kind of my own hardened conventions of how I saw someone from that generation, how I assumed those people to be. You have your view of your own father, and you live with him and you grow up with him, if you do, and you've kind of cemented this narrative of who this person is, when really, like, the only way you could really know is by being in his actual shoes. And to be able to kind of let go of the things that I held so tightly and submit to kind of expressing the honesty of a character in that moment, that was amazing for me, especially as like kids of immigrants and immigrant myself, having that detachment that comes with immigrating through culture from your parents, and to be able to connect with them in this type of way is something that's so magical. I'll never forget this.
Isaac, what was that experience like for you, working off of memories and this sort of reconstruction in some ways, and perhaps finding new truths or understandings of family as you've experienced it? What was that process like as you got into it and created these characters?
I guess intentionally I tried to distance myself from the material in a way, because I knew that if I just let myself get wrapped up in my memories, then that ends up creating this very introspective sort of myopic work that I didn't want. And so for one, I thought, this film needs to be about these individuals, and I really need to explore, for instance, what were my mom and dad going through, but to separate them from being just my mom and dad, but to just think of these people as human beings. And it was a weird roundabout process where once I did that, separating my mom and dad from my relationship with them, I could see myself more in them and the things that I'm going through now. And I found myself injecting more and more of like my own personal stuff into like their story. So a lot of the things you see in Steven's storyline, I feel was really coming out from a very personal place in my own life, as I was pursuing trying to be a filmmaker and all those things. But once we got on set, our amazing production designer, Yongo Lee, she had designed this mobile home to look almost identical to the one that I grew up in.
Oh, wow.
So walking onto the finished set, I walked to the back porch and I opened the door and I half expected to see our farm there. So there was this weird, like out of body sort of experience that I was having within all of that. So yeah, even though I tried to separate myself, there were many times that, you know, I'm just completely reminded of my own childhood. And, you know, there's obviously a process of working out your own memory and working out your interpretation of these past events when that takes place. Yeah, I didn't want it to turn into a very expensive form of therapy where I'm just like, you know, dealing with my past. But yeah, so at the same time, I was trying to keep my head and just make sure we try to tell a good story, try to make a good film.
Steven, you mentioned having to let go in your own right in this role, and Jacob is a flawed character. He has these aspirations and he's rendered with a lot of empathy, but there are mistakes and there are arguments. Can you just talk a little bit about the nuances of this role and finding your way through them and navigating it over the course of this film?
Yeah. You know, I think there was, what's really cool is on a larger theme. I think one of the things that was made very apparent to me, really like fortified through this experience, was how deeply interconnected we all are, how much we are just a part of the whole thing, and how we don't exist without each other. And, you know, in that way, not to apologize for people or you know, to make excuses, but rather I think everybody's trying to live their truth, and I think everybody's just trying to live their life. And it can be myopic, it can be selfish. It's not justifiable sometimes, but it's their truth. And I think when I approached Jacob, everything I felt like he was striving for was real and true. And he meant it that he wanted to do this for his family. But was he aware enough to realize that maybe perhaps it was also for him too? Who knows? Probably when you're an immigrant just trying to make it, like, you're not thinking of those higher order things, you're just living your truth. And so what was really special about it was I just had to be as convicted in my reality as I needed to be, and every other actor was also convicted in their realities. And that alchemy of coming together really opened my eyes to how we miss each other, how we misunderstand each other, how we aren't able to connect for whatever reasons. And sometimes it does take an entire barn to burn for you to see what it really is, you know. One really profound lesson for me was, you know, I remember, and Isaac was the only one that will ever see these horrible takes, but when the barn was burning, you know, for me, I was like, oh, this is the moment. This is when Jacob's gonna lose his mind and he's gonna like weep and cry and freak out, and this is his moment. And I kept trying to generate it. The first couple takes, I was like, all right, why am I not getting emotional? My body wouldn't let me get there. And I was like, what is happening? And then I would try to like force it. But luckily I had a little bit of experience under my belt, so I knew not to force an emotion that didn't feel right for them, didn't feel like it was manifesting. And so I kind of let go. And then the subsequent take, I just was there. I was just trying to be present for the scene. And as that happened, I looked over and I look at Yeti, who is so incredible, She's so incredible and so honest and so truthful.
Mhm.
She was bawling. She was weeping, take after take after take. And not to say that that wasn't hard or difficult for her or a lot to manage, but it flowed out in a way that was so deeply truthful and honest and felt like it could flow out of her forever. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's right. You've been holding this family up the whole time. You've been holding the pressure and the burden of having to, you know, uphold this family in ways that Jacob doesn't see. And when I saw that, that was like, you know, you hear this and you know this mentally, but like to like experience it in that way, in such a profound way where you can like simultaneously be outside because you know you're on a movie set, but inside because you're playing it in that moment is such an education. And so, you know, I think, you know, with Jacob, I just try to play it as honest and true as I could. And it's really wonderful that that Isaac assembled like really incredible actors that were all trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's such a fantastic cast
Oh,
across
yeah.
the board. And of course, in many ways, the heart of this film is the relationship between grandson and grandmother, which can lead to, I think, some of those poignant moments in the film and also some of the funniest. I imagine that that requires an interesting working from memory, Isaac, as well.
Yeah. I mean, everyone always asks me about the pee stuff after screening, which no comment on that. Yeah, with Alan, it was interesting because we were looking at all these different kids, and something about him was just so striking when we were seeing his audition tapes, where I just kept wanting to watch him. And Yoon Ya-jung is just an incredible actress in Korea, and I mean, for me, it was a dream come true to work with her. And yeah, just knowing that they would be paired together, I just knew that there would be quite an amazing dynamic that would arise from them. Like what Stephen was just saying right now is just another example of that. Like I felt like as a writer, I could only write so much, and then when the actors take that, there's this moment of performance in the present that you just can't create on the page. And you just have the cameras there and they capture it, and it's such a significant event for me. Like it's something new unfolding when that happens. So for the casting process, that was a big deal, trying to find the right family, because I knew that all these moments, especially when you're working with kid actors, child actors, you need to create a very realistic environment so that something very dynamic comes out of every take. And all the actors were great about creating that for the children. And one of the ways in which I made sure we try to cast this correctly was I just had this family portrait that I was putting the faces in and just making sure, okay, does this look like a family? Can I imagine this as a family? And something about when all the cast was together, it just clicked for me then that this is right. This is going to work. And I had just full confidence in them once that happened. And the scenes that you mentioned with Alan and Yoon Ya-jung, I mean, those are some of my most favorite ones, just the way that they would play off of each other. And she would come up with all kinds of interesting things to do. Like the chestnut thing was her idea, where she spits it out and offers it to him. And we didn't tell him we're going to do that. We just decide to roll and see how he responds to it. So that was a lot of the process where we were just trying to capture that present moment, as I was saying.
Yeah. And you mentioned being a bit perhaps surprised by the reactions to the film, which premiered way back at Sundance in January. But I would imagine that as you were getting to filming, that it came alive in another way. In terms of getting that feel of family just right, can you talk a little bit more about specific choices that you made and whether it was on the set or in the ways that the actors were blocked out, like what choices you made to just give that sense of authenticity that comes through so clearly?
I think one, I think what was important was the preparation process, Stephen. I don't know if you would agree. Like we hung out a lot together in that house, and almost like a family, and we went over lines together and kind of honed what we were going to do. I felt every day we would kind of prep, and that was really important. And then when we're actually filming, we did try to give the children more of a first take, if you will, so that they could respond very naturally to whatever our very seasoned and veteran actors would do for them. So there was I don't know, it felt like a very communal process, Stephen. I don't know how you would describe it, but
Yeah. I mean,
we tried to create that.
yeah, it really, that feeling really showed up truly, honestly, from the first day. We were all in, and I really think that's a testament to like what do they say? They say directing is 97% casting or something like that. And I think, you know, I think Isaac really has such a wonderful eye for seeing the truth and like how those connect with certain actors. And truly the alchemy that he created was pretty incredible. It was pretty, like, we didn't have to sit there and agree that we were all going to be in. It just happened, and we just did it. And yeah, there was moments where we had to uphold like maybe the structure of the scene for the kids, but they quickly learned. I mean, like there's that scene we did outside of the chicken sexing thing on the stairs, and Alan, man, that dude, that little star dude, like he like, I was like I was doing my coverage, and then he was like doing his lines, and then he's like, whatever. And then we flip on him, and it's beautiful. He's in, he's present, he's connected. Like, he knew exactly what he was doing. I was like, you, Alan, man, come on, dude. Like, he's so
That's right.
pro.
He did that sometimes.
Yeah, he's so aware and like so present, even down to when we first cast him in that room. You know, you had me improvise, and I just I left the room and I came back in as, you know, Jacob, as Appa. And, you know, I wore that energy, and I just came to him and I just started speaking to him in new lines that he didn't have any context for. And he just was there with me. And as he was there with me, after we were done, I was like, yo, that's David. He was so angry, so present. And it was a really wonderful alchemy.
If I remember that casting day, I think you did a little thing where you kind of scolded him a little bit.
Yeah.
And he responded to it. And,
yes.
And then our producer was like, I think you need to talk to Alan and make sure he's okay, and make sure he knows that was a scene, that was fiction. And I talked to him, and he's like, oh, yeah, I know. You know?
That dude's a star.
He was just present.
Yeah. He has deep presence. It's awesome.
Just phenomenal performance in the movie. And then I feel like on the other side, bringing a very different energy to the movie is Will Patton. Isaac, can you talk about this character and where he comes from, his role both in this story and presumably you know, a version of another character from your past as well?
So Will plays this individual is someone who is based on someone from my life, and he was a farm worker who ended up working on our farm for many years, and he ended up becoming a very close friend of my dad's. And they had this very unlikely friendship where you just don't expect them to be such good friends, but somehow something clicked within them, and they were very good friends for many years. And I had known Will for a while and had just been looking for something that we could do together. And I think he was the first person that I saw in this whole film where I thought I'd like to create something with this character that Will Patton will play. That's something that came to my mind as I was thinking about it. And Will and I talked a lot about this role as well, and Will was very excited to play him. I think he felt like he related to him in many ways as well, like feeling like he's an outsider, or seeing things from almost like the gaps, basically. And yeah, the person in real life really did drag a cross around every weekend, and he was Pentecostal. I don't think it's as unrealistic to your viewers in Savannah. Like they'll recognize people like this, I think. But in our town, you know, it wasn't a crazy sort of thing. I mean, he was just our local, you know, Jesus freak, and people knew about him. And yeah, he was a dear friend, and so from my point of view, I wanted to create a character who was all of those things, but not to do it in a way that alienates him from the viewer, if that makes sense, but lets us see what makes him tick, things like that.
Steve, what was it like finding your way into that dynamic? Because I feel like a key part of Jacob comes alive in those scenes.
I think, like Isaac said, you know, it's that perspective from the gaps, you know, and that's something that I hold within myself too. You know, a lot of perhaps like minority cultures, or anybody in any type of minority, just kind of whatever version that is, congregates together because they can see a similar viewpoint. And I remember growing up in Korean church and realizing as I got older, I was like, oh, I don't know if I would have been friends with all of these people if I wasn't made to be, because we could all see it from a similar place. And I think there's something very amazing about how Will approached Paul, and how much he was willing to take his own ego out of the process. He submitted to this work, he submitted to this project, and he didn't carry with him anything that was needing to be validated or wanting to take ownership. Really, he was just like, I'm here to service this thing. And that's a really wonderful place to be, because I think for Jacob, he's constantly running up against a society and people that need him to fit within a mold of who he's supposed to be. But deep down inside, not even deep down inside, like almost basically bubbling right beneath the surface, is this autonomous human being that wants to be seen for himself. And so because he can't get that outside in society, he kind of generally avoids it. But when he connects with Paul, he assumes one thing, but then he finds something else, which is someone that can deeply relate to his perspective. And that's when you know, like, we're telling a human story here. These are not just cultural relevant things. These are very human things of being able to traverse society as we know it, or these boundaries that we create for ourselves. And that's what I really enjoyed. I mean, Will and I had such a wonderful time. I remember when he first came, he came a little bit later into the production, and so the family was already really kind of like together, which was also very perfect for how things played out. And we were eating lunch one day, and he's like, yeah, you know, he was, you know, obviously anybody feels nervous coming into a new group. But I remember telling him, I was like, you are exactly supposed to be here, and we are all supposed to be here, and this feels right. And it wasn't from any type of like wisdom on my part. It was just like, it really did. Like when Will came in the door, I was like, yeah, that's right. Like, this is so crazy. Like, this is, everyone's perfect for this. And then we just had to do it. Like, we didn't belabor scenes. We weren't like trying to block things to death. We were just like,
we didn't have time.
Yeah, we didn't have time. So many single takes. Not because we ran out of time, but also because like Isaac was so deft with his touch of just like knowing when he got it and when he didn't. And that was really awesome, because it also secured like such a confidence in the alchemy that was created, where Isaac could walk away from a single scene with one take, with no hesitation. And for me, I was like, okay. Like, that's all you're asking for in a director, really, is just like a brilliant leader. And yeah, he was certainly that, and it was all magical.
Yeah.
Well, you guys were giving us gold, so it wasn't hard. Yeah.
In terms of the climactic fire, I mean, given all that, given the fact that you had to sort of not have a lot of time and work in those constraints, I imagine that still required a lot of planning, and I guess you couldn't go as big as the actual grandma went. But what was that filming process like, given the constraints?
Yeah, we had a big debate almost on set where we're trying to figure out, are we going to burn this thing, or are we going to try to use special effects? And just because the special effects route would have made it easy. But yeah, Lockie, the cinematographer, and we were both getting together every now and then and saying, I think we just got to burn that thing down. And Lockie, to his credit, I mean, he prepped so much to just nail everything on that day that we're going to burn the barn down. And luckily the producers figured out a way for us to meet all the fire requirements and all those things that we had to work through. And we had a pared down crew on that day. We met on a Saturday, I remember, to burn it down. And boy, that we had no idea what was going to happen. And the fire was so hot that I remember pulling Steven and Yeti back from it after we got a little bit of a take. And I was just worried that they're going to get burned up. And they were so in it that they seemed, they were just always present in the scene. And I was like, hey guys, we gotta pull back a little bit. And I don't know, that scene is an honest miracle. The timing of everything, the way everything worked out, the way Lockie blocked everything with, the way he had the camera set up, and Yongok with her amazing production design. And we had a VFX, or the effects guy who set up the fire, Conley, just did an incredible job as well. There's no way you can predict what the fire is going to do. So the fact that it looked the way it did and it was timed the way it was, I slept really well that night after it happened.
It looks incredible. It's a fitting end to a great movie. Thank you so much to Steven Yeun, Lee Isaac Chung. The film is Minari, and thank you all for watching. I'm David Canfield with Entertainment Weekly. The film will be released soon for you to watch again. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, David. Thank you.
Thank you so much.